like to talk to you all about tenement life in the Lower East Side of Manhattan. And this is going to give a little bit of information about what some of the immigrants who arrived at Ellis Island had to go through in order to establish themselves in the new country of America. So tenement is derived from Latin, which means to hold, which sounds somewhat endearing, but it came to mean many people who are crammed into a single living quarter, which certainly was the case for many then Americans living in the United States at the time. Now, a lot of this information I learned as an extension from a visit to the Lower East Side Tenement Museum, which is a museum that is in operation in the Lower East Side of Manhattan. So when the immigrants arrived to America, they were under the impression that America had streets paved with gold. But they came to find out that that certainly wasn't the case. In many cases, you couldn't even see the street because there were so many places lined with streetcars. The tenements were very dark and dreary, and that was mainly because of the setup. So as you can see, the tenements would be in a single row so that bedrooms oftentimes wouldn't get any single source of light. Now, upon entering a tenement, there would be a joined, kind of like a community area of a hallway that would be shared by people ascending the stairs or descending, of course. And it was very dark, and then the tenements would just be connected from there. Now, oftentimes the rooms had to double. They had to play double roles. So as you can see here, kitchens oftentimes turned into bedrooms because a lot of times that was the space that was available because there weren't simply enough bedrooms for a lot of the families were pretty large. Now, sometimes the rooms would end up, the furnace could be a great source of heat. In fact, it was the only source of heat in a tenement, but then it also was the only source of heat also in the summer, in which case sometimes it would soar to 100 degrees. So in order to cope with the heat, a lot of times, because obviously there wasn't any air conditioning, people had to sleep on, or chose to sleep on fire escapes. So you can see some of the children and people, women carrying children trying to walk outside to escape the heat with their infants. As far as sanitation goes, really non-existent. So you can see the privies that were outside, bathrooms were outside, so in the middle of the night you wake up, you got to go downstairs to go to the bathroom in the winter. Streets just covered with garbage. You can see in the picture here, these children are playing on a street and there's a dead horse just laying right beside them. So completely unaware of sanitation, how it plays a role in our health. It was also the beginning of public schools, so that was a good thing that came out of life at this time. So the thing too is that since there was such a heavy demand for places to live, the rent could be very high. So people had to have many different jobs and everyone worked to pay the rent. So sweatshops, this is the beginning really of sweatshops, and they were sweating because the temperature was so high. Even children worked, helping with making artificial flowers that would go to, ironically enough, the wealthy families in the area. So another option that some people had, rather than working in their homes or in their tenements, they would leave often to go to factories where they would work 7 days a week in very close working environments with one another. Particularly a topic that was, or an option, a job option that was favored by a lot of Jewish immigrants was street carts, because they could set their own hours. So they would peddle their wares or their food or whatever their product was on street carts. But the problem with the street carts was they would line the streets, and so it became very packed, but also, fortunately, a way for people to gain access to things that maybe they weren't able to get in America that they long for from home. So obviously there were ended up being a lot of orphans at the time, and so this was also a beginnings of a lot of younger children getting involved in gangs and crime. And oftentimes a lot of children would end up playing on the roofs, which was kind of dangerous considering legislation finally allowed for there to be air shafts so that every tenement would have access to at least one room of having fresh air. Now, fortunately, a lot of reformation came out of this time period, so Jacob Riis helped to get toilets in the buildings, and then eventually lights were established. But Jacob Riis is really helpful as far as advancing the living conditions in the tenements. If this is something that interests you, these are some of the books that I read. That I gained some of my information that I shared with you today, so you can certainly check them out. And thank you very much for being a wonderful audience on my Ignite Talk on tenement life.